Powered by Riverside.
What's going on, everybody, and welcome into a brand new episode of the Broken Wheel Bearing Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Codd, and oh man, we are exiting week 2 of the 2025 NASCAR Cup Series season. What a jam-packed race we had this past weekend down in Atlanta. We had the Craftsman Truck Series, we had the Xfinity Series, and of course, we had the NASCAR Cup Series. Busy race weekend. I would say probably a very entertaining race weekend. I know a lot of fans were really disappointed with the way that the 2025 Daytona 500 ended and concluded. A lot of concerns about, drafting tracks, a lot of concerns about, restrictor plate racing coming out of Daytona. I think Atlanta, in my mind, I personally believe it kind of cleared up some of the questions and a lot of the concerns within the fan base. I actually really enjoyed what we saw this past weekend down in Atlanta. We'll be talking a lot about that in a little bit. So, again, welcome on in. Brand new episode. Again, we're finally almost out of February. I know that the sun has been staying out a little bit later. So, folks, we all made it. We have finally gotten out of the winter hive. And of course, we are now getting closer into the heart of the 2025 Cup Series season. So, loaded show on tap this evening. Stay back. If you're listening to us live on YouTube, feel free to hit our chat line up. The Blown Engine line is up. We want to hear from you. If your driver ended up screwing up this past weekend at Atlanta, if you're a crew chief, if another driver pissed you off, I think we got some Blaney fans. Voice that opinion in our Blown Engine chat line if you're listening to us live on YouTube. Again, we will read and we'll be kind of the voice of reasoning to hopefully get you over that edge and over that hump to make you feel better going into the circuits of the Americas. So, before we get things started, a couple ways to continue following us, supporting us, and listening to us. Again, YouTube, we are live every Tuesday. This week I had to do it on a Wednesday episode just because life kind of got in the way. Nothing serious. It's just I had to take care of some business yesterday due to work. But we are live on YouTube at the Broken Wheel Bearing Podcast. Follow us, subscribe to us. Feel free to listen to us live on air every Tuesday nights. And again, we have a Facebook page, the Broken Wheel Bearing Podcast. We will post what time on Tuesdays. If you follow us, we'll have that information available on our Facebook page. If you love what you're hearing, but you miss our live episodes on Tuesdays, that's okay. We have you covered. Follow us on Spotify, follow us on Amazon Music, and follow us on iHeartRadio. Again, all you got to do is hit follow, like, whatever it is. And again, our episodes will be uploaded on our networks for your viewer or for your listening enjoyment the next day. Finally, we have our Facebook page, the Broken Wheel Bearing Podcast. Feel free to follow, like us on Facebook at the Broken Wheel Bearing Podcast. So we appreciate all the love. We appreciate all the support. Love doing this show because I love our fans and I love having true NASCAR fans listening to us. And I kind of, not to get emotional, but I have to say this, and I've been very honored and blessed with this opportunity doing this show the last couple of years. We're coming up to our 2-year anniversary of the Broken Wheel Bearing Podcast. When I first started this show, I was like, you know what? Let's give it a whirl. I love talking NASCAR. I love talking fast cars riding around on multiple circuits. And I think a couple people got sick and tired of me calling them every single day. So I said, screw it, let's do a podcast. So 2 years ago, we set up the first ever episode. And if you have been with us since day one all the way until today, obviously you can tell there's been a massive difference in how the show runs and how the show operates. When I first started it, I had no clue what the hell I was doing. So again, we appreciate everyone that's been with us since day one and continuously support us each and every single week. When I've been through a couple co-hosts, unfortunately moving on, we appreciate the love and support. Always do. All right. So show announcements, though. Before we kick tonight's episode off, I got a couple of them. Again, we will be June 22nd. if you've been listening to us the last couple of weeks, June 22nd, we have been advertising. That is our annual BWB Pocono tailgate. Yes, that's right. Our home track always have to be up there, always have to be with our fans, and always have to, again, have one of the best tailgates that we could possibly put on for all of you. This is more of a fan appreciation from us to you. Again, that'll be June 22nd. More details to come as we get closer to Pocono. We are still multiple months out. Second one, Dover, July 20th. We'll be live, Monster Mile. Live episode from the Monster Mile. First time I've been down there since 2019. Another local track I want to hit back up. And in honor, we're going to do a live episode of the Broken Wheel Bearing podcast live from the race track at Dover. So more details to come as well. That one's a little bit even further out than Pocono. So wrapping up with some show announcements. Let's get into the start of tonight's episode. Let's get into our fast headliners courtesy of jski.com. If you are a NASCAR fan, you have to follow them on X, Facebook, or by web at www.jski.com. Absolutely incredible website in regards to all news related to NASCAR. So, okay. First up, from jski.com, Rebel Bourbon will be rolling out Kyle Busch 108 single barrel bourbon. The Kentucky-based Rebel Bourbon, the official bourbon of Richard Childress Racing, announced the limited edition bourbon featuring Rowdy Kyle Busch. If you have not had Rebel Bourbon, it's really good. Actually, when they made the announcement that they were heading into NASCAR, I believe it was a couple years ago, I didn't know much about them. And since they gotten into NASCAR, I've been drinking some Rebel Bourbon lately when I do like during the holidays. It's very smooth. It's fantastic. And now that Kyle Busch is kind of have a limited edition, may have to pick that up from the liquor store myself this week. Next up from sponsorship updates courtesy of jski.com. Acceptance Insurance will be sponsoring Ross Chastain in 5 Xfinity races with Junior Motorsports. So if you guys remember, Ross Chastain is going to be doing a couple of rides in the 9 car for Junior Motorsports, and Acceptance Insurance will be on 5 races with Ross Chastain. What 5 are they? Well, we're going to kick things off this Saturday in the Xfinity Series with the Circuits of America. Acceptance Insurance will be Ross with. Then we have Darlington in April, Nashville in May, Dover, and of course, Iowa Speedway. So those are the 5 races that Acceptance Insurance will be on. So if you see Ross Chastain in the Xfinity Series in those races, they'll be a sponsor. Next up on our Fast Headliners segment. Not so fast, excuse me. Sorry about that. The Clash is expected to return to Bowman Gray Stadium in 2026. So pretty interesting. This one was a little bit interesting myself because there was some discussions. Obviously, we were out in LA from 2022 to 2024. And then we did Bowman Gray this past year for the Clash. We heard rumors that possibly that the Clash could be rotating to different racetracks throughout the country. But according to jski.com, it's expected to return to Bowman Gray in 2026. How do I feel about it? I thought, again, I was pretty impressed with the race a couple weeks ago with the Clash. It's an expedition race. I mean, really, how much more we like? I saw a lot of fans that were really mad. They were really upset with it. Then I saw a lot of fans that were kind of like, "Oh, this was one of the best races I've ever watched." But it was the same. But these were the fans that were complaining about the LA Coliseum, and I'm like, Coliseum and Bowman Gray had the same size track. It was a quarter of a mile. I think it's really good for NASCAR just because of the fact that it's going to be cost savings considering that you're going to North Carolina instead of LA or down to Daytona. But it's an expedition race, folks. I mean, I thought it did what it needed to do. It provided me a great night of entertainment. It wet my lips from wanting more NASCAR in the next couple of weeks. It was right before the Super Bowl. So, again, it did everything it needed to do as an expedition race. So whoever wins the Clash, I'm out sitting there going, "Wait, let's write them down as probably the biggest title contender of the year." No, it was more of a, hey, NASCAR, that was incredible. Thanks for giving us the opportunity to just watch racing for a couple hours. we'll see you in a couple weeks now at Daytona. So that's how I feel about the Clash. But again, I am kind of happy to see them, I guess, go back to Bowman's Gray just because of the cost savings. So next up on the sponsorship updates, Corey Heim signs developmental deal with 23XI. Guys, you know how high I am on Corey Heim. One of my favorite prospects coming into the 2025 season. He lands a deal with 23XI as a developmental driver. This one was announced during the race, actually on Sunday at Atlanta. Corey Heim has signed a multi-year deal to join the team. It's 23XI's first developmental driver. The 22-year-old, who will continue as part of the Toyota driver developmental program, will also race in multiple events throughout the season, the NASCAR Cup Series and Xfinity Series. A 12-time winner in the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series and winner of the season opening event at Daytona, Heim will continue to serve as 23XI's reserve driver. So, little news and a little update on Corey Heim. Again, I like this. I kind of felt like we're, with him being a championship contender, with him being a championship threat in the Craftsman Truck Series, but then not just on top of that, he continues winning races. He's 22 years old. I do think, again, I like this role because it's a developmental role for him. I don't think that if you put him in Cup this year, he would have succeeded. And I know a lot of people are like, well, they put Riley Herbst in the 35, yada, yada, yada. Corey Heim was not ready to go. Absolutely not. I love what I see from him in the lower level. I need to see more. And I love what 23XI and Toyota has done. They said, you know what? Screw this. We're going to slow the development up. And we're going to make sure when he does get to the Cup level, he is going to impact races. The other thing, too, with Corey Heim, yes, he signed a deal with 23XI Racing. I don't think necessarily he's going to end up I don't think he's going to end up at 23XI. I don't. I think he's going to end up at Joe Gibbs Racing. Denny Hamlin is probably close to retirement. It's going to take some time to develop the driver, and then you're going to put him probably in the 11. Interesting move. Next update, sponsorship update. Chipotle signs a deal with Ryan Blaney, and I saw this past weekend Chipotle had on the app you could order the Ryan Blaney special. That was pretty cool. New sponsor in the sport, so welcome on in Chipotle. And then finally, our final sponsorship update, courtesy of jski.com. MRN and PRN this past weekend created NASCAR Racing Network. So I believe that the combined NASCAR Racing Network was used in the Craftsman Truck Series, and according to jski.com in the article, announced the NASCAR's MRN and Speedway Motorsports Performance Racing Network today announced, or this was on February 21st, announced the creation of the NASCAR Racing Network. Last Friday, the network kicked off its live coverage of the Craftsman Truck Series from Daytona International Speedway with the season opening fresh from Florida 250 that was won by Corey Heim. So the combined network ended up starting last week at Daytona, which was really weird because I felt like I heard more about it during the Atlanta race weekend. So, but those are pretty much the sponsorship updates for this week, courtesy of jski.com. If you are a NASCAR fan and you need news and quickness, jski.com is where it's at. Follow them on X, Facebook, or by web at www.jski.com. So, all right. Let's talk Atlanta with all you. Always got to get the news out first. Got to take care of that. I'm going to get you guys all up to date. Now let's get into Atlanta discussion. So this is now year 4 with Atlanta Super Speedway, right? 2022, 2023, 24, 25. Yeah, so this was the 4th year with Atlanta being a super speedway. And I think a lot of people were really excited when they first announced the move. Remember, Atlanta had that old surface. It was beaten up. Obviously, Kevin Harvick had that Kevin Harvick line for so many years. He knew how to race at the bottom of the track. personally felt that Atlanta was just getting stale. They were getting their dates moved all around. Obviously, there was things with Darlington going on. Originally, they had 2 dates, right? And then it went down to 1 date. They got moved from the fall, then they got moved to Labor Day because California didn't work out. No shocker there on Labor Day. And then they got moved to the second race of the season for a little bit after Daytona. And then all of a sudden, Kentucky Speedway ends up pretty much folding. Atlanta picks up 2 race dates, and then we hear the news that it's going to become a massive super speedway. The adjustments that were made with the repavement and obviously the elevation of the banking of the turns, I know for a fact when they first made the announcement, I was really, really excited about it. I was like, damn, this is going to be really, really cool. Packed racing at Atlanta, how the hell is this going to work, right? 1.5 miler. Year one, I was glued to the TV. I was like, I have to watch practice. I have to watch qualifying. I have to watch every single race event down at new Atlanta Super Speedway. And man, even practice did not disappoint. When you heard the radio chatter on, you got the line coming high, you got a drafting partner. I'm like, whoa, wait a second. This is Atlanta, right? It's so weird to think. And I will say this. I had concerns after probably the third overall race. I said, damn. I said, this surface is just not going to last in the hot Atlanta summers. It's very humid. We saw what the old surface happened to that. I was like, damn. I'm like, they're gonna. It's almost like I even said this last week on the show. I said it feels like it's gonna have to be repaved almost every like 6 years, and most likely it will still. It will be. But I'm gonna tell you one thing. This past weekend, watching the trucks, the Xfinity, and the Cup, I was absolutely massively impressed with all 3 series of racing on that track. And this was now the 7th overall race at the new reconfiguration. I am absolutely still glued to my TV when we go to Atlanta because of the pack racing. Last week at Daytona, listened to a couple other podcasts, Loose on Entry, a couple other ones. They talked about it, and a lot of people were very disappointed how the 2025 Daytona 500 ended. They felt, that wasn't exciting. We knew what was going to happen. They were going to end up, pack racing, wreck, boom, done. I am always going to be on board with, as long as I can watch cars go really fast and race each other, I'm glued to the TV no matter what. But I definitely understood the concern with Daytona. Now, we went to Atlanta this past weekend, and I will say, I do think a lot of people's opinions changed about super speedway racing. I loved what we saw at Atlanta this past weekend. The Atlanta race to me in the Cup Series reminded me of restrictor plate racing back in probably the early 2000s. Right? They weren't all, they weren't all single file, or they weren't all one ginormous pack. They weren't like the other day. I felt like when they were racing, you had high energy lines. You had drivers that were willing to make moves. And I feel like the field also had a little separation, right? I mean, being in 10th place at one point in the race did not equate for you going from 10th to number 1 right away within a lap because you got in the right line. You had to earn those positions to get up into the in the front of the pack. You did. And as I said, there was a lot of separation. Yeah, they were still in the draft. There's no doubt about it. They were still in the draft, but there was some separation. Very similar if you go back to 2001, or if you go back to 2000, or between, well, let's just say this, between 2001 and probably 2006. Look at Daytona and Talladega races back in that time frame. You had separation. Yeah, they were in the draft, but it's not like the draft like today where they're flying up to each other and you can go from 30th all the way up to probably with 7th within a lap and a half. we saw incredible racing from the Cup Series. Yeah, once again, we saw Ford completely dominate. Could they finish? No. We saw Chevrolet once again can't qualify a damn car. I don't know what the hell's going on with them, but they can't qualify a damn car. But there they are on the verge of winning. And then again, we got Toyota. Toyota once again showing us that they have speed like they always do. What's called is this Toyota, the TRD engine is always going to flex its speed and muscle. The problem with Toyotas that I am sorry, I did not mean to say it like that. The problem with Toyotas is this: I don't know how they are as in the air in drafting. We saw it at Daytona last week. Those cars were loose. We saw it again this week. Those cars were loose. It made out to be a very, very entertaining race, in my opinion, on Sunday. But it wasn't just Sunday. Let's talk about Friday night. Or excuse me, Saturday afternoon. Oh gosh, excuse me. Saturday afternoon with the Craftsman Truck Series. First of all, guys, yes, that's right. I got myself a nice 3-cheek Kyle Busch hat on tonight. He was my pick to win the Cup Series. Yeah. He's my pick to win the Cup Series race on Sunday. Came close, no cigar. But he did come up clutch, and he did win on Saturday afternoon in the Craftsman Truck Series over Stuart Friesen in an incredible ending of the race. That was an incredible ending of the Craftsman Truck Series, and Kyle Busch came out on top. And I've always said this, to me, Kyle Busch, whenever he wins, man, does it really, we all love him. We all love him, whether you love to hate him or you love him. We all love Kyle Busch. And the sport is so much better when Kyle Busch does win. I said this, I think, last week, in between the past week. I can't remember if it was on the podcast or if it was on the Facebook page, Broken Wheel Bearing Podcast. Kyle Busch in 2024 looked like he was completely lost, right? I mean, he sold the truck team. He obviously was dealing a lot with Brexton. He was taking, he was setting all that stuff up. And coming out of Daytona, when he had that interview with Fox and basically said the fastest car in the race had to be the fastest one into the wreck, that felt like old Kyle Busch. And then on Saturday afternoon, what does he do? He capitalizes and wins the race. And again, he won over Stuart Friesen. Very close finish at the end. It was very entertaining all throughout. But the one thing outside the race winner and outside Stuart Friesen coming up second, I want to talk about that. I think a lot of people that have been fans of our show since day one, Frankie Muniz, baby. Frankie Muniz. Yes, Muniz Watch. Yes, we are back with Muniz Watch. Now, the one thing I will say about this, last week, Frankie Muniz ended up, after Parker Kligerman's disqualification, ended up finishing 11th at Daytona. He finished 11th, then Parker got disqualified, so Frankie ended up finishing 10th. First top 10 of the season. Pretty impressive, right? On Saturday, though, he was, personally for me, I thought Frankie Muniz had a truck to at least finish in the top 10. I'm not saying win the race, but definitely a truck to finish in the top 10. He ended up getting wrecked, ended up DNF and finished 26. But it was the post incident interview that FS1 had with Frankie that got my attention. Because a couple years ago, if you've heard me say this, I think the Frankie Muniz story is one of the most fascinating stories in NASCAR. Childhood actor, and we all know what happens to majority of childhood actors. They just go ballistically crazy, or they become future stars in different aspects. It didn't seem like Frankie really had a direction, right? He had the head issues, all that type of stuff. Then he comes into NASCAR a couple years ago in the ARCA Menard Series. Frankie Muniz led the points for such a long, or for almost half the season. Unfortunately, he lost the points lead to Jesse Love. Eventually, Love caught up to him. Love ended up winning the championship in the ARCA Menards. Rest is history. But Frankie finished third in the ARCA Menards series point standings. Last year, he had a couple of Xfinity rides. But again, going back to what he said after the Craftsman, after the truck race on Saturday, after he wrecked, he basically said, he's like, drivers don't respect me. I don't think anyone expects us to run up in the front. So the fact that we were there on merit, no lucky breaks, we raced our way up there, Muniz said. I felt like we were just cruising. I'm hoping to earn some respect. I'm hoping to earn respect out there, and I hope with how tight I was racing people, and I was fairly clean the entire time until I keep doing it, it's going to be tough. Frankie Muniz also said, I believe that was it. Give me a second. I'm reading the article. He also mentioned that he's like, I definitely don't get respect out there 100%. Nobody goes racing in tandem with me. I think someone put me 3 wide and pushed me to the outside, which ended up causing me the wreck. So, uh, my thing with Frankie, it's tough because I there are people that probably think it's a publicity stunt. I don't. I started the Muniz watch a couple years ago. I have the flag still. I'm a very, very big Frankie Muniz fan because of what he's been able to do. And for a while, it's going to suck. And for the last 2 weeks on super speedway races for Frankie Muniz, have we seen, is he up there because of super speedway, or is he actually up there because he's got raw speed and that truck can actually be in the front of the pack? Personally, for me, it might be the latter. It might be the latter. I do personally believe that Frankie Muniz can drive a truck in the front of the pack. That doesn't mean he's going to win races, but that definitely indicates to me that he could be a top 20 truck. The problem with Frankie, though, a lot of people are not going to respect him until he starts earning their respect. And it sounds really stupid and cliche, but that's the truth. I'm not saying putting someone in the wall. But if he continues racing clean and also makes the hard passes, he's going to have to make the hard passes. These drivers are going to continue to bully him. And it does suck because, again, I think it's a great spot in the sport. And I do personally believe that Frankie Muniz has talent. It sucks. I thought we were looking at back-to-back top 10s for my man, Frankie Muniz. But we didn't in the DNF. But again, like I said, Kyle Busch, incredible finish on Saturday afternoon for the Freight 208. He ended up picking up the Truck Series win. Continues adding to that collection of total wins in NASCAR at this point. Super exciting. And again, I do believe that the Cup Series win will come for Kyle Busch. He's got some tracks that are coming up. I really do have circled for Kyle Busch. Speaking of Kyle Busch, let's talk about his, RCR teammate. Not in the Cup Series, but in the Xfinity Series. Bennett Transportation and Logistics 250 on Saturday took place after the truck race. That one was won by Austin Hill. At this point, are we shocked when Austin Hill wins a restrictor plate race? I will say, on the final restart, though, I got to give Eric Almirola a ton of credit. He held in there for a good portion of that lap. But I'm going to tell you, it is very, very difficult to get around Austin Hill when he gets the lead in a restrictor plate track in the Xfinity Series. We saw it last week at Daytona, right? Honestly, he probably should have won the Xfinity Daytona race last Saturday. Obviously, he had his own issues. Ended up leaving the race after 86 laps. But the thing is that Austin Hill is just such a lethal. It's almost a cheat code. It is like it's a combination. And I've heard a couple of podcasts talk about it. I mean, RCR is just so good with building these cars on these super speedways in the Xfinity Series. And then you put a driver like Austin Hill in there, who is, let's call it as is. I mean, he's starting to become a very, very good. He's very good at blocking. Out of all the drivers in the top 3 series, Austin Hill might be the best blocker. I mean, I would probably put Joey Logano up there, but the point is that Austin Hill is an absolute cheat code. And like I said, to me, Eric Almirola held on as much as he could. Unfortunately, once Austin Hill got even, Austin Hill was leaving. Final caution of the race ended up occurring on the last, once the leaders took the white flag. And again, NASCAR became massively inconsistent like they've been the last couple weeks. We'll talk about NASCAR's inconsistencies after the Cup Series because I want to tie everything in that topic all together. But Austin Hill ended up winning the Bennett Transportation Logistics 250 on Saturday night down at Atlanta. So, all right, let's roll into the Cup Series. Let's roll into the Cup Series now and let's discuss the Cup. And again, if you're listening to us live on YouTube, and listen, if you're on with us on YouTube, Blown Engine Line chat is wide open. Right now, we're again just send us a message. We'll get right to it. I'm trying to be hopefully your voice of reasoning. I know a couple of drivers are struggling right now. I know there was a couple drivers getting in the fights after Atlanta, but like I said, I'm your voice of reasoning. Feel free to drop a chat. Blown Engine chat line is wide open. You can get on in as we speak. So, Cup Series and Better Health 400 was this past Sunday down at Atlanta. A couple of statistical reviews as we exit Atlanta, courtesy of NASCAR.com. Sunday's race was ran at a 3-hour 27-minute time frame. They had it was 11 cautions, for 11 cautions for 63 laps. Lead changes, there was 50 lead changes among 15 drivers. So who led laps on Sunday down in Atlanta? Well, Kyle Larson did. Ended up winning stage 2, by the way. Very impressed with what we saw from the 5, but I personally think that I think the biggest outlier to me has been Kyle Larson and super speedways are absolutely a nightmare for each other. I don't necessarily think that's true. And the reason why is because Kyle Larson in the spring 2023 race was leading the race, or he was right behind Eric Almirola. Eric Almirola blew a tire and took him out. There's been a lot of weird incidents with Kyle Larson on super speedways, but came oh so close on Sunday to pick up that first super speedway and get that monkey off his back, essentially. So again, Kyle Larson led laps. Ryan Blaney led 1 lap. We'll talk about Blaney in a second. Kyle Busch led 13 laps. Ross Chastain led 25 laps. And then we had Joey Logano, who led 83 laps on Sunday. Todd Gilliland led 7. Oh, Todd Gilliland. Oh, it's such a great car again. Such a great car on super speedways. And first of all, it was fantastic to see the Aaron's Dream Machine back in the starting lineup. That paint scheme was absolutely remarkable to come back. I know I've asked the audience, multiple times on our Facebook page or podcast, what sponsor would you want to have come back into the sport? We always get different discussions. Aaron's came back, and man, Todd Gilliland, he blows a tire in the front of the pack. Luckily, I mean, I know the caution came out for him. Luckily, nothing more disastrous ended up happening. I mean, right where he blew that tire, I mean, that could have been a massive big one right there. So I'm glad that no one else ended up getting wrecked, but just ruined Todd Gilliland's day. I was so upset. Gilliland ended up recovering from the blown tire. He ended up finishing 15th in this race, but again, he did lead 7 laps 5 times in this race. Other drivers that led laps, we had Chase Briscoe, who led 5. BJ McLeod led 1. That was probably during caution or while a pit cycle was going on. I don't really remember BJ McLeod leading a lap, but according to NASCAR.com, they have it down in the stats. Other drivers to lead a lap were Shane Van Gisbergen. He led 2. Very interesting to see SVG in the front of the super speedway. Josh Berry, he ended up leading 56 laps. Excuse me, I keep saying winning. He led 56 laps. won stage one. So Josh Berry won stage one, Kyle Larson won stage two. Like I said, we just talked about Larson. Well, let's talk about Berry for a second. And I was massively satisfied with what I saw from Josh Berry on Sunday. He was aggressive. He was blocking. He did, to me, Berry did a very good job being that quote unquote fourth Penske car that everyone continuously talks about. I'm not surprised to see the 21 though be successful at a super speedway. And why is that? Because, well, their last win was at Daytona with Harrison Burton. But I felt like what I saw from Josh Berry on Sunday was definitely more than what I saw from Harrison Burton over the last couple of years, even with Burton's Daytona win. Unfortunately, Berry ends up getting caught at the last caution, the second to last caution of the race. That sucked, man. That really sucked. I was hoping that he was going to end up pulling it off, but he ended up winning stage one. Alex Bowman, he led 6 laps in this race. And then you have William Byron, who led 6, and then Austin Cindric ended up leading 47 in this race. And then NASCAR.com, according to NASCAR.com, they have Cody Ware leading 1 lap. Again, I don't remember Cody Ware leading a lap, and I'm sure it was under caution. So, but the final driver that I didn't mention that led that A lap in this race was one Christopher Bell, and that was your race winner. Christopher Bell. Sometimes it's not how you start, and this was a perfect definition of it's not how you start, but how you finish. Led 1 time in the race on Sunday for 1 lap, and obviously it was the most critical lap of the race, and that was for the victory. Christopher Bell ended up picking up his 10th career win down at the Ambetter Health 400. Again, we talked about it, or like I was just saying, Toyotas always so quick on super speedways. I love what Toyota can do on super speedways, but again, it's what they do drafting together. They're not great. They do not take hits on those cars very well. A lot of the time they're pretty loose. Christopher Bell as well was not involved in any of this race pretty much until the end of it. Didn't finish in the top 10 in stage 1, didn't finish in the top 10 in stage 2. Kept himself pretty much clean in the middle of the pack for majority of the race. He started 32nd too, guys. Comes up, multiple cautions, obviously kind of helps out. Ended up having speed at the end. He got around Larson. Like I said, picked up his 10th career win on Sunday down at Atlanta. Couple of things here. One, according to Nate Ryan, NBC Sports, Christopher Bell's win on Sunday at Atlanta was Joe Gibbs Racing's first drafting track win since Denny Hamlin at Talladega on October of 2020. Now, this is Joe Gibbs Racing. Bell's win was Joe Gibbs Racing's 12th victory at Atlanta Motor Speedway, but this was Toyota's first win at Atlanta Motor Speedway since Kyle Busch won in 2013. I looked up that stat. I'm like, there's no way. There is no way. We went through a phase with Carl Edwards, Kyle Busch, Denny Hamlin, Matt Kenseth, and then you had Martin Truex Jr. in those Joe Gibbs Racing cars. No, it was correct. Nate Ryan, again, coming down with some stats. Again, Bell's win was Joe Gibbs Racing's first win on a drafting track since Denny Hamlin won in October of 2020, which is insane within itself because Toyotas are always so good on super speedways. And it was Joe Gibbs Racing's 12th victory at Atlanta, but Toyota's first victory at Atlanta since Kyle Busch back in 2013. Couple of things for me with Christopher Bell with this win. One, we know how talented Christopher Bell really is. Late bloomer coming up into the Cup Series. Came up with Joe Gibbs Racing. Obviously, we know what happened with the model. He basically sat in the Xfinity Series, and he went to Levine Family Racing back in 2020, sat behind Eric Jones during that developmental phase, finally got into the 20 car, won his second career race in that car at the Daytona Road Course. His second career start in the 20 car on the Daytona Road Course, and the rest has been history. Christopher Bell, to me, This win for him, I love it. I love the time frame that he got it to. Similar to William Byron last week at Daytona. These two drivers have a lot of ammunition and a lot of firepower, and there's a lot of things they can do now in regards to gambling in races on strategy that could put Christopher Bell in a better points position than 2024. I thought 2024 Christopher Bell was fantastic until the end of the playoffs. Obviously, we know what happens down in Martinsville. He had the fake melon attempt, ends up getting disqualified, or he ends up dropping to the last, get dropped to the last car of the lead lap, misses the play or championship four after back-to-back appearances. But this win in Atlanta, similar to what we saw in Phoenix last year when he won the race early in the season, there's a lot of ammunition and a lot of gambling that him and Adam Stevens can do. And for me, my goal, if I'm Adam Stevens and Christopher Bell, is to win as many damn races as possible in 2025. Go for it. Go for it. And similar to William Byron, right? You win Daytona. Why not? We can, we're going to race for stage points and all that type of stuff. Well, listen, until we start seeing more and more winners, which we're not going to get for a little bit now, because it's like, okay, we're just in the beginning part of the season. I want to see these two drivers go for gold. Do it. Go for the checkers. The more wins that they can get, the better they will be into the playoffs. And I get it. With stage racing, now with the Xfinity fastest lap, provides you a playoff point. There's a lot of different variables. But for me, if I'm a crew chief, and maybe that's why I'm not a crew chief, that's why I'm sitting here on a podcast tonight. But if I was Adam Stevens, I'm sitting there going, you know what, Christopher, we're going for it. Every track we feel like we have an opportunity, we're gonna go off strategy of everybody else. I love when these drivers win early in the season, and obviously we know it's going to happen because we got through two races. But I love when these drivers win early in the season, and because it provides you a different variable in the season. You're not panicking now. You're not playing conservative. Look what happened last year. Going into the playoffs, we saw Kyle Busch, we saw Ross Chastain, we saw Bubba Wallace, Chris Buescher, all missed the playoffs. And leading into all four of them missing the playoffs, what did we hear from all the radio chatter? Well, we got to get points here. We got to get points here. We got to get points. Well, guess what? If you win a race, yeah, you still want points. I get it. But push yourself to limits where you can continue to win races. For me, I love when, obviously it sounds stupid because we know drivers are going to win early in the season because we have to have a driver win a race. But I love when these extremely talented drivers win in the beginning of the season. Because for me, I'm looking at it going, shit, Christopher Bell just won Atlanta. Well, how many races are we, listen, how many more races he's going to win before we get to the Coke 600? It may not be any. But it might be an opportunity, like I said, to continue building those playoff points. We know how talented Christopher Bell is. Back-to-back championship four appearances in 2022, 2023. And then last year, let's call it as is. He was almost in the championship four. He's so close, and he's knocking on a championship door right now. If I'm Adam Stevens, go for it. Go for gold. Go win as many races as possible and completely do the complete opposite strategy of everybody else and to ensure that your driver gets in the victory lane. And if they go 6 weeks and they realize that it's just not working, then you go back to conservative mode. But you have the opportunity now to play that because of an early season win. I love Christopher Bell. I think he is a extremely talented wheelman. And I love how Joe Gibbs Racing has his guys, he's allowing his guys back on dirt again. I think it's really fun. I think it's great for local track fans. I know when they race at Pocono, the track near me is called Grandview. And look, I mean, there might be an opportunity where I might get to see Christopher Bell basically 20 minutes from my house this year because Joe Gibbs allowed him back on dirt. Still too early to give you any prediction or any identification on who's going to be in my championship four because we just went through 2 restrictor plate races, and I know for a fact we're not going to get it after the circuits of the America. But I'm really excited to see what Christopher Bell looks like as we enter or as we are in the Easter break, and that's probably when I'm going to be able to identify who my championship four can be. Christopher Bell again picked up his 10th career win at Atlanta. Speaking of Atlanta, other things I wanted to touch. We talked about it, right? Let's just talk about Toyotas. Toyotas again. I was telling you guys, they have speed. The drafting, when they draft, they just do not draft well. I mean, they just seem so loose. But the other manufacturer, Ford. Last week I said it. Ford has a ton of speed. They can't win a 50-50 ball, quote unquote. This week, once again, Penske. First of all, let's not even talk about Penske. Let's talk about Ford in general. In qualifying, one Chevrolet qualified in the top 10. And who was that? Kyle Busch. The rest were all Fords. And then Toyota ended up winning the race. And Chevrolet almost won the race. I mean, now granted, Cindric almost won as well. There was a lot of variables. But Ford, I mean, you got to look at, Team Penske, right? Ryan Blaney, he ended up having, he only led one lap. And I know that he got spun out by Carson Hocevar. But then I look at Logano, who ended up leading 83 laps, was really dominant throughout that race. I mean, at one point I'm sitting there going, I'm typing in my notes and I'm going, Joey Logano may end up blowing the doors off this place today. And we might be talking all about Joey Logano. He ended up leading 83 laps. But what was weird about Ford, though, is when they got into the pack, their cars were not good in dirty air. They just weren't. Blaney was able to make it out of it. I just believe that was personally off of tires. And again, going back to how I love what we saw from Atlanta this week, tires did play a little bit of a role in this race. We saw it with Chase Elliott until he ended up getting wrecked by Ricky Stenhouse Jr. I mean, Chase Elliott ended up bouncing back to a 20th place finish. But tires actually played a role. And Blaney, again, he ended up putting tires on at the end of the race. He ended up climbing back up to 4th after being spun out by Carson Hocevar, which we'll be talking about in a second. But again, continuing back to the Penske Fords, you had Cindric, who led 47 laps. You had Berry, who led 56, and you had Logano, who led 83. So over 50% of this race in laps led came from those quote-unquote, the 3 Penskes and your affiliate Penske car. 2 of them ended up getting wrecked, Berry and Cindric late in the race. But then you had Logano hit dirty air and became non-existent, and Blaney basically salvaged himself basically with fresh set of tires while everybody else didn't have them. But they kept flexing their speed all weekend. And it's amazing to me because it's just like last week at Daytona. They're so fast. They're so good. They're so quick. The Roush Yates engine continuously putting them in the front of the pack. No wins. You can be fast as you want the whole entire race. But they have come up with 0 wins because of strategy. And like I said, I know Berry and Cindric ended up wrecking late in the race. So, I mean, their strategy led them to an opportunity to win the race. So unfortunately, they both wrecked. I think I was more upset with Joey Logano the last 2 weeks, though. The amount of laps that he has led the first 2 weeks of the season due to restrictor plate to come up with 0 wins, I mean, you got to look at it. It's kind of unacceptable. And I'm saying that as a podcaster. I know we have a live audience right now on YouTube. I say that as a podcaster that I'm like, okay, I get it. it's a lot more difficult than just leading laps. I get it. But as an analytics guy, you're one of the elite drivers. You're the reigning champion. You led a lot the last 2 weeks, and you come up with zero. But again, Toyota and Chevrolet coming up with those 50-50 balls. Now, we were talking a little bit about it, and I think a lot of people are interested to hear this topic of conversation. So on Sunday, Christopher Bell won the race. The second place car in that race was Carson Hocevar. Carson Hocevar may have pissed off the whole entire field. May have pissed everybody off. So before we get into Hocevar, I got to say this. I got to give credit to where credit's due with HBO Max and Turner/Bleacher Report, whoever's basically running that. The in-car audio screen they have on HBO, fantastic. Folks, if you don't have HBO Max tonight, after you listen to my show, go get HBO Max, go listen to the in-car cameras because it's fantastic. I could tell you the whole field was pissed off from Carson Hocevar without even watching a second from Fox. Him and Kyle Busch, it started off with Kyle Busch, right? Kyle Busch ends up going on the radio. He goes, "You tell that 77 next time he pulls that stupid shit, I'm gonna wreck his ass." That was after stage one. Then you had the incident late in the race with Ryan Blaney and Carson Hocevar. Ryan Blaney ends up spinning, ends up flipping out, calling Carson Hocevar a complete moron. Then, at the end of the race, after he finished second, there was radio chatter that they were getting pissed because they thought the 77 was going to wreck the 5 and the 20. And then on pit road, what did you see? You saw Ross Chastain and Carson Hocevar end up talking at the end of the race. I got news for everybody that's been calling me, texting me, "Oh, Hocevar can't race," and all that type of shit. Knock it off. This is what NASCAR needs. They need Carson Hocevar to continue doing this. You need a villain. I love what Carson Hocevar's comments were at the end of this race. I thought they were fantastic, right? And I posted it on our Facebook page, the Broken Wheel Bearing Podcast Facebook page. Carson Hocevar said, "We're here to win races, not be a boy band and love each other and play on the playground together. There's things I would clean up, but you're not going to make the right decisions every time. I can only apologize and say I'm going to get better." And that was from Carson Hocevar via NBC Sports. He's 100% right. And as I'm listening to Kyle Busch's in-car camera or in-car radio, sitting there complaining about what Hocevar is doing. And I love Kyle Busch. I do. Again, I've been a Kyle Busch guy since day one. I have. I mean, it wasn't always my favorite driver, but I appreciated him because he was aggressive and there was things that he did that were stupid. But these guys that are veterans now completely forget that at one point they were in Carson Hocevar's shoes and they were doing some of the shit that they were just complaining about that Hocevar has done. Let's look at some of these drivers, right? Okay, Kyle Busch. How many veterans did he piss off in the beginning of his career? For the longest time, him and Kevin Harvick hated each other because of the on racetrack rivalry that they had. But you know what? It made for entertainment. And it was exciting to see those two race each other aggressively. Now, granted, some of the issues I will say, I'm not condoning what he did with Ron Hornaday. I'm not condoning him driving Kevin Harvick's car basically into a wall in pit road at Darlington. I'm not condoning that. But what I'm saying is that it's exciting to have a driver that the field doesn't like. What made Ross Chastain so much fun a couple years ago? What? His aggressiveness. Yeah, did it always end the best possible way for everybody around him? No. But you know what, though? He's got an obligation to his sponsors. He's got an obligation to his team. He's got an obligation to his spotter, his pit crew, everybody to win a race. all of a sudden after Darlington, Rick Hendrick ended up saying we have to have a talk with Ross Chastain, and look what happened. I mean, Ross ended up having talking to. Granted, he won that after the talk. He won Nashville, he won Phoenix, he won Kansas this past year, but it has not seemed like it's been the same Ross Chastain since. Still aggressive, but trying to be a better guy. But here's the difference I've always said. There's a massive difference. And I heard Loose on Entry kind of say this, and it resonated with me. Mark Martin was one of the most polite drivers in the sport. Right? Mark Martin even admits if I was a little bit more aggressive. And again, Loose on Entry said that last night, and I appreciate what he said, and I wanted to share it to the audience as well. You need aggressiveness to win a championship. You need to be aggressive. There's so many drivers that aren't aggressive, and they're trying to be polite, and they're trying to. What are you afraid of? Denny Hamlin ripping you on Actions Detrimental? Is that what you're afraid of? I like what Carson Hocevar is. I like what he's been doing. He's a fun driver. He's an absolute fun driver. And yes, does he make mistakes? Of course he does. We watched it in the Truck Series. Newsflash to everybody watching him for the first time. He's been doing this for a while, but he wins. Let's head to our blown engine chat line. We got a chat coming in right now during the show. And we have Jack checking in. He goes, they all started wanting to win and were aggressive. Seems like the veterans forgot they were once there. Yeah, no, completely agree. I completely agree with that statement. All these veteran drivers at one point, again, I mean, as I said to you, I mean, Kyle Busch and Kevin Harvick did not talk for so many years because they both hated each other. Kevin Harvick and Ricky Rudd had issues. Kevin Harvick and Greg Biffle had issues. But guess what? Kevin Harvick was going to go down as one of the best NASCAR drivers ever. Kyle Busch is going to go down as one of the best NASCAR drivers ever. I get etiquette. I get respect. But I'm going to tell you right now, do you think Dale Sr. gave a shit whether he rattled Terry Labonte's cage and half the crowd at Bristol booed him? No, he ended up coming out with the greatest quote ever after the crowd booed him. There's a difference between being aggressive and intentionally wrecking people. Carson Hocevar is not intentionally wrecking people. From what I see and from what I saw, he's not intentionally wrecking people. And again, going to the in-car camera, Kyle Busch is sitting there complaining. He's like, oh, listen, he pulls that move. That's not just Carson Hocevar. That's his spotter giving him the direction. I need a driver. I need the aggressiveness. And I know I love Denny Hamlin for saying this. I love Denny Hamlin, but Denny Hamlin saying, oh, well, there's a difference between entertainment and racing and all. You're NASCAR. If I want to, you're NASCAR. You are an aggressive type of motorsport. I don't expect this from F1, and I don't want you guys to be F1. I don't expect this in F1 because guess what? I don't want to watch. They're basically follow the leader. And by that point, Verstappen's 21 seconds ahead of the lead by lap 7, and it's like, okay, who's the racing? Oh. NASCAR is an aggressive sport. It always has been, and it always will be. Carson Hocevar is not going to be the first driver. He's not going to be the last driver that races like this. So you guys better get over it. Because what's going to end up happening is the fans are going to bitch and complain and cry and carry on. And we're going to have another talk, and we're going to ruin a young, talented driver, in my opinion, his potential, because we had to have a stern talking because you need to race cleaner. Everything he has done this past weekend was fine. And we've seen it with so many other drivers throughout the sport. He's good. He's good for the sport. Leave it alone. Because guess what? I fell in love with Ross Chastain because I watched Ross Chastain in 2022, and not just because of the Hail Melon. I watched him be aggressive. I still like Ross Chastain. I'm a big Chastain guy, but Chastain will not win a championship until he gets back into 2022 Ross Chastain mode. Don't be afraid. You owe it to your sponsors. Win the race. final discussions coming out of Atlanta. Final point for me tonight on the Brooklyn Wilbury podcast from the Atlanta show. NASCAR, massive inconsistencies again. Massive inconsistencies. And so this past weekend, Sunday's race ended up falling underneath of a caution. Okay. I get it. Safety concerns. No worries whatsoever. I'm always for racing back to the line. But that's what NASCAR does. They throw cautions, safety concerns, all that type of stuff. So I appreciate that. What I don't appreciate is the night before on Saturday in the Xfinity Series race, Austin Hill ended up winning the race. No big deal whatsoever with Austin Hill winning, but it's the way that NASCAR officiating did it. What do I mean by that? Well, if you watch the replay of the final lap, they were wrecking on the backstretch basically at the same time frame, same area that they did in the Cup race. And the Xfinity Series, the officiating didn't wave the caution flag. And the CW crew kept saying, wait for the caution, wait for the caution, wait for the caution. No caution came. They raced to the flag. They raced back to the line. The week before, we had Daytona. We had the issue Saturday in the Xfinity Series race. Spinning in the tri-oval, caution flag flew. Okay, we're good. That's the right call in regards to safety. Sunday, wreck on the backstretch. They raced back to the line. There's no consistency with NASCAR whatsoever. And I did this in Action Instrumental this week. I heard Denny Hamlin say, and I agree with Denny Hamlin. If you're gonna go off the premise of in regards to safety, that's why we threw the caution on Sunday at Atlanta. Sure, okay, we get it. But the night before you didn't, in the same spot of the wreck, all that type of stuff. And then last weekend, again, you had massive inconsistencies. Where does the line get drawn? I guess it's almost similar to the NFL, where the NFL fans are like, what's a catch? What is a catch? For me as a NASCAR fan, I'm at the point now where it's like, what's a caution? What's a caution? Because in 4 races in the last 2 weeks, NASCAR has showed me they don't even know what a caution is. And I don't care what Elton Sawyer says. And I appreciate him saying, well, it's in regards to safety. Okay, well, then explain to me why you let them race back to the line in the Xfinity race on Saturday. Explain to me why they raced back to the line in the Daytona 500. And explain to me why you threw the caution in the Xfinity Series race last Saturday at Daytona. Because you're telling me safety. Well, 2 out of those 4 races, you used caution for safety. The other 2, you didn't care. I'm tired of NASCAR and the inconsistency. And again, if you're going to let them race back to the line, that's fine. If you're not, that's fine too. Just be level-headed, consistent. I get it. Fans don't want to see a race end on a caution. Sunday's race, I got so many people texting me going, dude, what? Race under a caution. Here we go. Stupid ending, yada, yada, yada. I heard that. I get it. It sucks. We don't want to see a race end under a caution. But what I'm tired of, and if it does end, if it ends under a caution, completely fine with that. But make sure every race ends under a caution. If it's if there's spinning and there's a wreck, do not be inconsistent. And NASCAR has done a great job in the last 2 weeks being massively inconsistent within their own rulebook. And I think that's why the fans, like myself and all of you that listen, anybody who watches NASCAR, I think that's why fans get frustrated. That's why fans get annoyed. It's like I said, it's similar to the NFL. When you watch an NFL game, you're like, well, what's pass interference? What's a catch? Well, that's NASCAR has now turned themselves into that. What's a caution? We just need consistency. Now, the good news is this, right? We're not going to probably have issues with knowing what a caution is for a little bit now, because our next restrictor plate race is Atlanta Talladega in April. Excuse me. So we'll have, hopefully there's time for them to figure this out. where to reckon and try. Because I'm going to tell you right now, if they go to Talladega and we see this nonsense again, it's going to just rile everybody up again. If you're going to worry about error and safety, then that's fine. But don't have similar wrecks in back-to-back days and let one of the races race back to the line and the other one ends in a caution. Because that's what's going to drive all of the sport crazy and our fans crazy. God, I hate officiating. I hate it. It all started when I was a kid, too. Umpires in baseball, referees in basketball, football. They're so obnoxious. They make the sport all about themselves. As NASCAR Gambling Podcast says, shout out to them. Race officials are terrorists. So, all right, exiting Atlanta. Here's your NASCAR Cup Series standings to date. Leader right now in the points is Ryan Blaney at 1. William Byron is 2. Tyler Reddick's 3. Austin Cindric's 4. Cindric's been really good. Back-to-back super speedways. Expected it. Now the real season to me starts in regards to who will become a championship threat. But Cindric's 4. Bubba Wallace is 5. 6 is Kyle Larson. John Hunter Nemechek right now sits 7th in the points. He had back-to-back top 10s. Him and Blaney are the only drivers that back-to-back top 10s to start the season. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. is 8, Alex Bowman's 9, and Chase Elliott is in 10th. 11th is Joey Logano. 12th is Christopher Bell. 13th is Denny Hamlin. 14th is Michael McDowell. 15 is Carson Hocevar, and 16 is Chris Buescher. So that's your top 16 right now in the points exiting Atlanta. Let's go to the Blown Engine line. Jack checks in again. He says, at least they're not doing replays. Well, wait until that happens. I'm telling you right now, it's coming. So we all know replays will be coming back into NASCAR. So final points outside the standings come exiting Atlanta. Chase Elliott and Brad Keselowski ended up wrecking. Ricky Stenhouse Jr. A lot of people are blaming Stenhouse, and it's very easy to blame Stenhouse because he's got the nickname of him on the fan base, Recky. But if you watch the replay again, it looks like Chase Briscoe got loose underneath Stenhouse. Stenhouse tried to check up. Unfortunately, got into Chase Elliott. I thought Chase Elliott was going to be a massive contender in that race, and he really had the speed, the tires. It was just working, but unfortunately, he didn't check out enough. He ended up getting wrecked, broke the he ended up breaking something on the car. They ended up replacing it. He got back out into the track. He finished 20th in the race. Brad Keselowski, though, unfortunately ended up crashing into Chase Elliott and ended up DNFing in that race. So, final point, I do love if there's a mechanical error or if there's anything mechanical, NASCAR is allowing teams to go back into the garage and they adjusted the DVB clock. Clint Boyer stayed on the booth this past week on Fox, and it's been fantastic. And it really, as Boyer said, like the last couple of years, you saw drivers blow a tire, and then all of a sudden they're DNF because they missed the DVB clock. I love it. I love how and honestly, the cool thing about this sport too is that the crews are also just as involved in the game or the race as much as the driver. So if the car ends up having like a broken axle or something like that, for them to be able to fix it and be able to put the car back on the track, yeah, granted, they'll be many laps down, but it gives a driver an opportunity to salvage a points day, something like that. So I'm happy that NASCAR changed the DVB clock, and the last 2 weeks it's done absolute wonders. So that's going to be the checker flag on our Atlanta discussion tonight with all of you. Again, Blown Engine Line is still up and running. Come check, come check in. If you're upset, disappointed in your favorite driver, let us hear it. Let me be the voice of reason to hopefully steer you into a better direction. So, all right, before we exit tonight's episode, let's talk a little bit about the race weekend in COTA coming up, the Circuits of the America, third race of the season. Pretty cool. I like this. I like how we go from, 2 super speedways. Now we go to COTA, a shortened COTA race, by the way, 2.3 miler instead of the full 3.64 course, I believe it is. Changing things up. I like it. And then, of course, then after next week or after Circuits of America, then we get Phoenix and Vegas. So we'll start seeing some ovals at this point. Last year's winner at the Circuits of the America was William Byron. Year before was in 2023 was Tyler Reddick. 2022 was Ross Chastain. So those are your three winners in the next gen car. Um, and then Chase Elliott ended up winning this race in 2021 in the inaugural event that was completely in rain all season long, or all race long, excuse me. And if you remember, a lot of the drivers were complain about the Rooster Tails. Dan checked in real quick on the Blown Engine line. He said, "Love the Coda layout this year." Yeah, I do too. I think the 2.3 is definitely going to do wonders. I think it's good. Honestly, I think it's really good for the sport. I really do. I think having a shortened length at Coda. My problem is with the 3.64. I thought they were just getting spread out way too far with one another. There wasn't really great racing. For a while, I thought that back straightaway was going to do wonders. The longer layout is much better. Let's say it is this. The longer layout is much better for the Formula One guys. It's not good for NASCAR. They just weave way too much. But let's get into some picks this week, courtesy of driveraverages.com for get you geared up for the Circuits of the America. Driver number one this week. I think everyone on the board, every podcast, every analyst is going to have this guy. We're gonna echo everyone's opinion. Shane Van Gisbergen. SVG had one race start in the Cup Series at this track, and that was last year. He ended up finishing 20th in this race. He had a car. He had the car to get up into the front. Something I think was mechanical last year. Something mechanical happened where he had to come down pit road. Ended up getting stuck in the middle of the pack. But SVG, I know everyone's going to be discussing all week long. That if you're a gambler, that's probably the sure bet fire to take. That's your best bet. Now let's get you into my favorites this week at the Circuits of the America. Um, Outside Shane Van Gisbergen, I love myself some Ross Chastain at Circuit City America. Ross in the next gen car has been very good here. According to driveraverages.com, he has an average finish of 4 flat in 3 races. He's got 1 win, 2 top 5s, 3 top 10s, and he's led 41 laps in the last 3 events. His best finish obviously was first, and his worst finish at Coda in the next gen car was 7th. Kind of got some puzzle pieces on how good Ross can be in this at this track. He ended up finishing 4th in Chip Ganassi equipment back in 2021. I love myself some Ross Chastain this week at the Circuits of America. Actually, I really just like Trackhouse this week. Trackhouse is pretty good at Circuits of America. Now you got SVG to add to the race. Oh boy. Driver number 2 that I like a lot. And I think a lot of people are going to be scratching their heads when they hear this pick, but hear me out. Alex Bowman. Alex Bowman, according to driveraverages.com, at the Circuits of the America had since 2022 in the next gen car, his average finish is 3 flat. He's got 3 top 5s, 3 top 10s, hasn't led any laps in the last 3 events, but his best finish was 2nd, and his worst finish in the last 3 events was 4th. And let's call it as is. Alex Bowman in 2022 was very close to winning this race when Chastain and Allmendinger ended up getting, basically beaten and banging until Ross took out AJ, which ended up knocking Alex Bowman off course a little bit. Alex Bowman is a driver I'm keeping my eye on in this race on Sunday. So driver number 2 for me, I like, is Alex Bowman. All right, let's get you another pick here. I'm going to go with Tyler Reddick as my final pick before I get to my dark horse. Tyler Reddick since 2022 has a 3.7 average finish in 3 races at Circuit City America with 1 win, 3 top 5s, 3 top 10s with 44 laps led. Best finish was 1st. His worst finish was 5th in the 3 race stretch. So Tyler Reddick, we all know what happened in 2023. That's remember when NASCAR took away the stage ending cautions. They ran a full road course without the stage breaks. Tyler Reddick ended up winning that race. Last year he was really good here, but William Byron was much better. I do like Tyler Reddick this week as well. So Shane Van Gisbergen, I feel like it's the overall guy that everybody likes. I love Ross Chastain this week. I love Alex Bowman. I like Tyler Reddick. So I know Bowman and I know Reddick and I know Chastain are the top three in driveraverages.com. But yeah, so those are my picks this week. And my final pick, my dark horse, is going to be Chris Buescher. Chris Buescher, according to driveraverages.com, has an average finish of 12.3 in 3 races with 2 top 10s. He's only led 1 lap in that stretch, but he's got a best finish of 8th and a worst finish of 21st. So, all right, that's going to take us to the checker flag on tonight's episode. So, again, appreciate everyone listening on YouTube. A couple more before we close out tonight's segment, a couple more Blown Engine chats coming in. Dan checked back in again. He said that this is probably Alex Bowman's best track. Yeah, I mean, it is. I mean, it's really weird. He's not a road racer whatsoever, but he's really good here. And that 48 car qualifies well, and he's always in the front. It is weird. Deb, she checked in. Really hoping to see Ross finish first. Anyone but Shane. Hope the experts are wrong. Yeah, I mean, I hope Shane, or I hope Ross Chastain wins too. I really do. I remember watching the race in 2022. It was super exciting when he won that race and the iFly paint scheme. Absolutely loved it. It's just, it seems like it's just going to be very difficult with Shane Van Gisbergen. I think SVG is just, he's going to be the guy to beat. Trackhouse is, we've already seen Trackhouse win a race here. We just talked about Ross Chastain. Trackhouse equipment's really good. Shane Van Gisbergen ran 1 race last year in a colleague racing car. But yeah, I mean, I feel like SVG is going to be the new anonymous pick. Dan checked in one last time. Seabell can't count out here as well. That's actually a really good point that you just brought up about Christopher Bell. Right now, according to driveraverages.com, he is 9th overall in average finish with a 12 flat in 3 races. He's got 2 top 5s, 2 top 10s, 10 laps led. Best finish of 2nd, worst finish of 31st in that stretch. And I believe his 31st was last year when he missed the S's. No, he finished 31st in 2023. Finished second here last year. Wow. Okay. All right, that takes us to the checker flag on tonight's episode. Appreciate everyone chiming in. Really appreciate the chatter on the Blown Engine line this week. We had some good chats going on. Appreciate everyone's love, support. Follow us on Facebook, Broken Wheel Bearing Podcast Facebook page, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Spotify, and of course on our YouTube channel at the Broken Wheel Bearing Podcast. With all that being said, enjoy your wonderful race weekend down in Circuit City, America. If you are down there, should be beautiful down there. So enjoy the weather, enjoy your time. We'll chat next week after the Circuit City, America. Be well, be safe. Good night.
Will you tell Mr. Dennett that Ricky Bobby is my best friend, and it's shaking big time.